Sometimes the most dangerous storms are the ones that brew silently behind a calm and smiling face. Explore the hidden tensions and the explosive conclusions of life's most difficult and intense internal battles. Subscribe now and stay tuned for the lightning strike in our next video.
They told me they had nothing left. That's the exact phrase my father used when I called him from the hospital parking garage, sitting on the concrete floor because my legs wouldn't hold me up anymore. Sweetheart, we have nothing left. You know how tight things have been since I retired? My mother got on the phone a few seconds later and said, "We would help if we could. You know that." And I believed them. I was 29 years old. I had just been told I had stage 2 breast cancer, and I believed every single word my parents said to me. That was 3 years ago. Last Tuesday, I was going through some old emails, the kind of mindless task you do when you can't sleep and your brain won't shut off. And I found a forwarded message my aunt had sent me by accident 8 months ago that I had never opened. It was a screenshot, a bank transfer confirmation, dated 11 days after the phone call in that parking garage. My parents had wired $46,000 to my brother's account. The memo line said one word: investment. I sat at my kitchen table until 4 in the morning just staring at it. Let me back up. My name is Claire. I'm 32 now. I live in Portland, Oregon. And 18 months ago I married the most patient man I've ever met. His name is Daniel, and he is the reason I'm still standing. I want you to understand that before I tell you the rest, because none of this story makes sense without him. I grew up in a suburb outside of Columbus, Ohio, in a house that always felt a little like a stage set. My parents weren't cruel people, not in any obvious way. They came to my recitals, they showed up to my graduations, they said the right things at the right times, but there was always, and I mean always, a version of every conversation where my brother came out on top. His name is Ryan. He's 4 years older than me. He works in commercial real estate, and for as long as I can remember, he has been the sun that my parents orbit around. Ryan got a car for his 16th birthday. I got driving lessons and a bus pass. Ryan's college tuition was fully paid by my parents. I took out loans and worked 20 hours a week at a campus coffee shop. When Ryan went through his divorce at 31, my parents flew out to Phoenix for 3 weeks to help him through it. When I got my cancer diagnosis at 29, my mother sent a card with a Bible verse and a $20 Applebee's gift card. I told myself for years that I was reading too much into things. I have a therapist, her name is Dr. Okafor, who spent probably 2 full years helping me understand that what I was experiencing was real and had a name. But even with all of that work, I still picked up the phone and called my parents first when I got the diagnosis. I still believed they would show up for me. The treatment plan my oncologist laid out was aggressive. Surgery first, then chemotherapy, then radiation. The surgery alone was going to run close to $30,000 after what my insurance covered. I had a decent job. I was a project manager at a mid-size logistics company. But I had about $8,000 in savings and $12,000 in student loan debt. I was not in a position to absorb $30,000 on my own. Daniel and I had only been together for about 8 months at that point. We weren't even living together yet, but he sat across from me at my kitchen table the night after my diagnosis and opened his laptop and started a spreadsheet. He had about $14,000 in savings. He said, "This is yours if you need it. We'll figure the rest out together." He didn't ask me if we were serious enough for that. He didn't make it a conversation about where our relationship was headed. He just opened the spreadsheet. I told him I wanted to try my family first. My parents said they had nothing. My brother said he was stretched thin from the divorce settlement and wished me luck. My aunt, my mother's sister, the one who accidentally forwarded me that email 3 years later, quietly slipped me $3,000 in a card and told me not to tell anyone. $3,000 and a whispered secret. That was the full extent of my family's support. So Daniel and I figured it out. We emptied his savings and mine. We applied for a medical hardship loan through the hospital's financial assistance program and got approved for $15,000 at a high interest rate. We sold my car, and I started taking the bus. Daniel picked me up from chemo every single Thursday for 4 months, no matter what was happening at his job. He held my hair back. He learned how to make the specific kind of plain rice I could keep down during the bad weeks. He slept on the hospital room pull-out chair 3 different times without being asked. I made it through. The surgery went well. Chemo was the worst 6 months of my life, but my numbers came back clean. I went into remission 14 months after my diagnosis, and I have stayed there. I am healthy. I am grateful every single day. But we came out of it with almost nothing. We had drained both our savings accounts, taken on the medical loan, and I had missed enough work that I'd burned through my paid leave and taken 2 months of unpaid. We moved in together, partly because it was the right time and partly because it was the only financially responsible thing to do. We spent the next year and a half, slowly, carefully rebuilding. We got married at the Columbus Park of Roses with 40 people, no caterer, and a cake Daniel's coworker made as a wedding gift. It was the best day of my life. During all of that, the chemo, the recovery, the rebuilding, my parents called occasionally. Not often. They asked how I was feeling in the way that people ask when they're hoping for a short answer. My brother sent a "hang in there" text when I finished chemo. My mother came to visit once, for 4 days, about 6 months after I finished treatment. She spent most of the visit reorganizing my kitchen cabinets without asking and making comments about how Daniel and I should think about buying instead of renting. I want to be precise about something. I did not expect them to fix everything. I did not need them to be perfect. What I needed in that parking garage was for them to tell me the truth. If the answer was no, if they had decided their money was going somewhere else, I could have accepted that. It would have hurt, but I could have worked with the truth. What I could not have imagined, what I would not have believed if someone had told me, was that 11 days after that phone call, they were wiring $46,000 to my brother's account. I found out later, after I confronted my aunt, who was mortified and apologetic, and who clearly had been carrying this guilt for years, that the money wasn't even an investment in any real sense. Ryan had taken out a personal loan about a year before my diagnosis to fund a real estate deal that fell apart. The loan had come due. He went to my parents, told them he needed the money, and they gave it to him. No hesitation. No things are tight. No Bible verse and Applebee's gift card. $46,000, 11 days after I called them from a hospital parking garage, and they told me they had nothing. My aunt had found out by accident, the same way I eventually did. She had tried to raise it with my mother once, and my mother had told her it was none of her business, so she had carried it. When she accidentally forwarded me that screenshot, she said she had meant to delete the thread entirely and had hit the wrong button. She apologized 6 times in the space of 1 phone call. I told her she had nothing to apologize for. For about 2 weeks after I found that email, I didn't say anything to anyone except Daniel and Dr. Okafor. Daniel, when I showed him the screenshot, was very quiet for a long time. Then he said, "What do you need from me right now?" That's the kind of man he is. Dr. Man he is. Okafor helped me think through what I actually wanted. Not just what I felt in the sharpest, hottest part of the anger, but what I actually wanted for my life, and my relationship with my family, going forward. I decided I needed to confront my parents. Not for them. I wasn't doing it because I thought it would change anything or lead to some tearful reconciliation. I did it because I needed to say it out loud, to their faces. And I needed them to know that I knew. I called my mother and told her I was coming to Columbus for the weekend. I didn't tell her why. We sat in their living room. The same living room I grew up in. With the same beige couch and the photo wall where Ryan's college graduation picture is 3 times larger than mine. Daniel drove me but waited at the hotel. I had asked him to, because I needed to do this part myself. I put my phone on the coffee table with the screenshot open and I pushed it toward them and I said, "I need you to explain this to me." My mother looked at it first. She went very still. My father leaned over, looked at the screen, and then leaned back and looked at the ceiling. Nobody said anything for almost a full minute. Then my mother said, "That was a loan. Ryan has paid most of it back." I asked her what the interest rate was. She said that wasn't the point. I told her it was exactly the point. That when I needed $30,000 to treat cancer, not to fund a business deal, not to fix a mistake I had made, but to treat cancer, to not die, they told me they had nothing. And 11 days later they sent my brother $46,000. My father started to say something about how Ryan's situation had been an emergency, how the loan was coming due and there were legal implications, how it wasn't the same thing as medical bills because insurance covers most of that. I let him finish, then I asked him very calmly whether he understood that insurance had not in fact covered most of it, that Daniel and I had gone into significant debt, that I had sold my car, that I had gone to a medical hardship loan program because we had run out of other options. My mother said, "You seemed like you were handling it." I have thought about that sentence every day since she said it. You seemed like you were handling it. Because Daniel was there. Because I had figured out a way through. Because I hadn't collapsed on their doorstep and made it impossible for them to look away. I had handled it, and apparently that had been permission enough. I told them I wasn't there to yell at them. I wasn't there to demand anything. I just needed them to understand what they had done. Not the version where it was complicated and there were reasons and everything balanced out, but the plain version. Their daughter had cancer. They had the money. They gave it to their son. My mother cried. My father apologized in the halting, uncomfortable way of a man who has never really had to apologize for anything. They said they were sorry. They said they hadn't thought about it that way. They said they loved me. I told them I needed some time, and I left. That was 2 months ago. Here's where the story takes a turn that I could not have written if I had tried. About 3 weeks after that trip to Columbus, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer. It was a doctor, a nephrologist at a hospital in Phoenix. He asked if I was Claire, and if Ryan was my brother, and I said yes to both. He told me that Ryan had been diagnosed with focal segmental glomerulosclerosis, a kidney disease, about a year ago, and that his condition had deteriorated significantly over the past several months. He was now in end-stage renal failure. He needed a kidney transplant. He was on the donor registry, but the wait could be years. And his body was not responding well to dialysis. The doctor said that Ryan's medical team had been doing preliminary compatibility testing among family members who had agreed to be screened. My parents had been tested and were not compatible. Ryan had no children. His ex-wife was, obviously, not an option. The doctor said that sibling donors often have the highest compatibility rates, and he was calling to ask if I would be willing to come in for a screening. I sat on the back steps of our apartment building for a long time after that call. I want to be honest about what I felt in that moment. Because I think you deserve the honest version, not the cleaned-up version. I felt something I'm not proud of. I felt a cold, quiet satisfaction that settled over everything before I could stop it. I thought, now you need me. Now, after everything. After the parking garage phone call. After the Applebee's gift card. After you seemed like you were handling it. Now I am the one with something you need. I let myself feel that for about 10 minutes. And then I called Daniel. He listened to the whole thing without interrupting, which is one of his great skills. When I finished, he said, "How are you feeling? Physically? Like, is this even something your body could handle right now given your history?" That was the first thing he said. Not, "What are you going to do?" Not, "Do you think you should?" He wanted to know if I was okay. I scheduled a call with my oncologist before I made any other decisions. She told me that living kidney donation is generally considered safe for people with my history as long as current health markers are strong, and that I would need a thorough evaluation before anything else. She was not discouraging. She was honest. I also called Dr. Okafor. We had a very long session. I thought about Lily. Not a Lily I knew. But the idea of her, the version of me that might have had a child by now, the child who might have needed something, and the question of who I would want to be in that moment. I thought about what my mother had said, "You seemed like you were handling it." And I thought about whether I wanted to be the kind of person who used someone else's emergency as a ledger to balance. I thought about Ryan, who had sent me a hang in there text and gone back to his life, but who was now lying in a hospital bed in Phoenix failing on dialysis. I thought about who I wanted to be when this was over. Not who I wanted to be in the eyes of my parents or in the story I told at dinner parties, but who I wanted to be when I was alone with myself at 4 a.m. I went in for the screening. I was compatible. I spent 6 more weeks going back and forth with the medical team, with Dr. Church, Okafor, with Daniel, and with myself. I read everything I could find about living kidney donation. I asked every question I could think of. Daniel came to 2 of the medical consultations with me and sat there with his notebook and asked the questions I forgot to ask. He never once told me what to do. When I asked him directly what he thought I should do, he said, "I think you already know what you're going to do, and I think whatever it is, it'll be the right thing." He was right. I did already know. I called Ryan myself, not through the medical team, not through my parents. I called him directly, and I told him I was compatible and that I had decided to donate. He was quiet on the phone for a long time, and then he said, "Claire, and stopped. He started again. He said, "I didn't know about the money. I mean, I knew they gave me the money, but I didn't know what they told you. I found out about 6 months ago. Mom told me by accident during an argument about something else. I've been trying to figure out how to call you ever since." I don't know if that's completely true. I don't know if he found out 6 months ago or 6 days ago. But I listened to him, and I told him that we would have time to talk about all of it once he was on the other side of this, and that right now the only thing that mattered was getting him healthy. The surgery was 8 weeks ago. We were at the same hospital in Phoenix in adjacent wings, and Daniel flew out and sat in the waiting room for 9 hours. My aunt came too, without telling anyone in my family she was coming, and she brought a thermos of coffee and held Daniel's hand in the waiting room. And later she told me that the 2 of them had talked for most of those 9 hours, and that Daniel was, in her words, extraordinarily good. Ryan came through the surgery well. I came through the surgery well. I was sore and tired for about 3 weeks, and I am still doing follow-up monitoring, but my body is doing what it's supposed to do. Ryan's new kidney is functioning. His color came back within days. He looked, his nurse told me, like a different person. My parents came to the hospital. They sat with Daniel in the waiting room. And from what Daniel told me later, it was mostly quiet. My father shook Daniel's hand when I came out of recovery. My mother stood in the doorway of my room and said, "Thank you." Just those 2 words. I looked at her for a long moment, and I said, "I didn't do it for you." She nodded. She said, "I know. I'm not going to stand here and tell you that everything is resolved. It isn't. There are conversations that still need to happen. Things that are still sitting in the space between my parents and me that neither of us knows yet how to pick up. Ryan and I have talked 3 times since the surgery. Real conversations, longer than anything we've had in years, and I don't know where that goes either. I'm not rushing it. One daughter is a doctor. Well, my father. One daughter is a target. And I made it, for the right reasons. And when I'm alone at 4 a.m, I can live with it. I didn't give my brother a kidney to win something. I didn't do it to make my parents feel guilty, or to be the bigger person in some performance of forgiveness, or because I had forgotten what they did. I did it because he is a human being who was going to die, and I was in a position to help. And I didn't want to be the kind of person who let someone die because the ledger isn't balanced. The ledger isn't balanced. The ledger isn't balanced. I want to be clear about that. What my parents did was a betrayal, and an apology in a hospital doorway doesn't erase 3 years of debt and grief, and driving myself to radiation because I'd sold my car. That accounting still exists. But I am 32 years old. I am in remission. I have a husband who opened a spreadsheet the night of my diagnosis and said we'll figure this out together. And I am not going to spend my life waiting for people to become who they should have been. Every morning I wake up and make coffee and stand at the window and watch the light come over the rooftops. And I think about the version of me who sat on a concrete floor in a parking garage and believed what her parents said. I have so much compassion for that person. She deserved better. She still does. But she also made it. And that part, the making it, the choosing, the being here, that part is entirely hers.